Welcome back. Here we are.
Hope we got that dance on the camera.
Well, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I am Stacy Ryan.
I'm Bill Ryan.
And I am the unicorn.
I'm the frog.
Yeah. Welcome back. Pod Populi, excuse me. I can't talk today. Palm Beach Gardens. And this is actually part deux. You knew I was going to say that. With our special guest who was here last time. So welcome back, Amy.
Thanks for having me again.
Back,
Yeah, we're
Amy.
excited that she's here.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Good song.
Oh, did you used to watch Welcome Back, Cotter?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, love that show.
I'm that old.
We're that old.
Yes.
Yeah, we're all that. Actually, Alex isn't that old.
I'm that old. I'm not sure
We're
about
all.
you two.
Alex, do you know Welcome Back, Cotter? I do not. Oh, shame. It's a shame.
You know John Travolta, though, right?
Vinnie Barbarino. That was like the first role he had.
Google it.
Yeah. Mr. Cotter.
Kata. Mr. Kata.
So we've been starting our podcast, our episodes rather, with some housekeeping from my husband.
Yes.
So feel free.
Not too much in the way of housekeeping, but I wanted to come back to that discussion we had about the dating apps and how they're going to be repositioning. As it turns out, I did a little bit deeper research.
You did research?
I did. Done that before.
Yes.
The Match Group owns Tinder, Hinge, Match, Meetic, OkCupid, Pairs, Plenty of Fish, Azar, and BLK.
There are
BLK, I
several.
think, is the
That's
newest
new,
one.
yeah. There's several in there that I'd never even heard of.
Now, are some of those not active anymore? Like Plenty of Fish, is that still?
I don't. Plenty of Fish is. I don't know. That's
Alex
a good
is saying
question.
yes.
Now I've got housekeeping for the next episode.
No, Alex, we already found out. He said yes, it's still
Okay.
active.
So one of the issues that, and it's probably why Match keeps acquiring companies. One interesting concept is what their revenue model is, right? So they have to have users and they have to charge users, and then users complain about, how much they're getting charged. The challenge is if the dating app is effective, it loses customers, right? Because the user finds
Their mate.
partner, and so they don't use the platform anymore. So it's a challenge from a market capitalization standpoint. How do you keep your stock growing, your stock price growing? It was the founder of Bumble, Whitney Wolfe Herd, who said that we will not be a dating app in a few years. Dating will be a component. It'll be a true human connection platform.
Oh, I wonder if they've done that now. I'm going to say no.
This is a fairly recent article, so I'm guessing not.
Human connection platform like Facebook, Instagram?
Possibly. More social.
What she went on to say, this is where you will meet anyone you want to meet, a hiking buddy, a mahjong buddy. So, and I remember there was a comment about pickleball. 61% of dating app users are aged 30 to 49, which is not too surprising.
No, I agree.
It's people out of relationships that are, leaving relationships that need the platform. The other interesting thing, do you both know the name Jay Shetty?
Yeah.
Yes, I follow him.
Do you?
I love him.
He actually spoke at the Compass Retreat last year. Yeah.
Oh,
But Jay Shetty and Match.com just did a partnership.
No. Oh, that's going to be huge.
He's taking his, personal improvement, mindset improvement to the dating app.
Wow.
I filled out his little survey, which I wasn't really thrilled with. Maybe I'll present some of that next week, but Jay might be upset if I,
Speak unkindly of the survey?
if I shared his intellectual property.
yeah.
Oh.
But I mean, it is publicly available, so maybe not. I don't know. But that was interesting. That, they're trying to, what I thought he was trying to do was kind of provide some guidance to people when they fill out their profile and other things. Mm-hmm. But that's not what it was.
I probably could have used that when my friend Stacy said, "This is a horrible profile." You heard that, right?
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, she's like, "You're just throwing everybody
Our whole
away."
Audience heard it.
Yeah, that's okay. And I do want to piggyback off of Hinge because I love their marketing. We're the app we want you to delete. I think that's brilliant. So, but they're making plenty of money because
which again highlights, the challenge.
Right. Yeah. That's it for housekeeping?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to continue kind of with the dating genre, but we're including dating with kids. So I'll start with so I was married at 30, you always do that, at 33. I had my daughter at 34 and then divorced ultimately in 2009. So Grace was about 3.5 years old, and I didn't go back into the dating pool for quite some time. But I remember she was probably 5 at this point, and I introduced her to somebody, and she called him the boy. She didn't say his name ever. She just said the boy. Now, he wasn't, young, but that's just to her, he was the boy. So when we were at my parents' one night, and she said, "Is the boy coming to dinner?" And my parents were like, "Oh, who's the boy?" It's kind of interesting. So what I wanted to do today was talk about, like, at what point do you know when it's okay to introduce somebody to your kids or child? How long are you dating when you start to bring this person around? There's a flip side to this too. When Grace was so young, she doesn't remember a lot from us living together because she was so young. She has no recollection of the divorce either, but it's just interesting because I was fortunate that she didn't go through any, heartache. But then I think, I wish at 16 or 17, or not wish, but I wonder what she would have transitioned into as far as a teenager if, hi, we have an audience. If, I divorced at a later age, I have no idea, right. But some kids fare well. I mean, she's fine because she was so young, mm-hmm. But, so that's kind of where we were headed today as far as, our topic. So you were divorced at what age?
So I was 34. Christian was 4. Mm-hmm. And I started dating, really, we were separated for 2 years. So I started dating a year before we were divorced. In North Carolina, you have to be separated for a year before. So, and I actually asked my ex-husband, are you okay if I start dating? Because mm-hmm. I wanted to be married, but it didn't seem like it was going to go in that direction. And I actually had a girlfriend that wanted to set me up on a blind date, which I didn't want to go on, but mm-hmm. I was like, well, what am I doing? Okay, I'll go. So yeah, I asked my ex-husband, well, at the time, my husband, I'm like, is it okay? And he's like, yeah, go. Okay. Well, that pretty much solidified if we're going to get divorced or not.
Check.
You're okay with that.
Yeah.
And I ended up introducing my son to him. Probably shouldn't have. I feel like I made a lot of mistakes in that regard, only because I really did love this guy. He ended up passing away. Mm-hmm. But I introduced him too soon. I didn't know at the time that I introduced him,
of course,
that I'm going to fall in love with this guy. Mm-hmm. Right. So in my mind, you need to know, is this person going to be in your life?
Right.
You've gone through the process. To me, it's 6 months. It's 6 months. You kind of know.
Right. I agree.
Who somebody is. And I think you have to have that conversation with that person. Like, hey, are we on the same page or what it is that we want? If so, then I do think you do have to introduce the kids, because it's going to be a nuclear unit. So you need to make sure that everybody's, cohesive. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's not realistic to say you shouldn't ever introduce your kids, but I also think you shouldn't do it right away.
Right.
Yeah.
What were, if I can ask, what were you say you've made some mistakes. What informed you that it was a mistake?
Interesting. My research on this topic today, I actually sat down with my 24-year-old son and said,
Nice.
Listen, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I want you to be candid. I know you love me and respect me, but tell me what your thought process is, because you're the one that went through it. He was 4 and pretty much I dated while, there's some people he never met. And there's other people. I dated a guy for 2.5 years that I knew I wasn't going to marry him, but I really enjoyed his company. My son said to me, he was in middle school at the time, and he said, the only thing I would tell you is that because I was in middle school and his kids went to school with me, I did not enjoy that. It was not
interesting.
Yeah. He said that just,
didn't enjoy the period you were dating the guy?
He didn't enjoy the fact that I'm dating a guy and Christian's going to school with his kids. He just said, they weren't friends.
It's awkward.
They weren't friends. And it wasn't like they were enemies, but they weren't friends. They didn't hang out in the same friend group. So it was very awkward for him, he said. And he's like, that would be the only thing. And he goes, it wasn't horrible. It was just, it's a time period for your child. It's the worst time period growing up. I mean, I don't know any kid that thinks middle school is great.
Fun.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that
unless you're the cool kid in middle school, and there were those kids.
Correct. True.
Yeah.
But so that was his only real input. That, and he did say, I think you could have waited on a few people that, but it's hard. It's funny. It's hard when you want to go do something. And I remember saying to somebody I was dating, you're just a friend. Like my buddy, Andy, you're a friend. So I don't want my son to know that we're dating. We're just hanging out. And that is kind of how I ended up doing stuff with people, where it would be, we're just friends. And I never let my son know that we were actually dating.
Right.
So I don't know.
Yeah. And I remember, so I was dating somebody, Grace was probably 12 or 13. And he came over to change the light bulbs, and her friend was there. And, he's on the ladder changing the light bulbs and all this stuff. And the friend says to Grace, he's cute. He should ask your mom out. And she's like, no, he hears them, and, they didn't know that we were already, kind of talking and whatever. And, he said, would you be okay with that, Grace, if I took your mom out on a date to dinner? And she was like, yeah. So I think the age is really important, because, when she was little, the boy, she doesn't even remember the boy. That was just, right. And also when she was that little, I was going out with my friends on the weekends. I brought her with me pretty much everywhere I went. She was there. So for us to be here when Downtown Gardens, before all of this craziness, and they had live music and whatnot, we would be here a lot, actually. So, being around a bunch of people and me talking to somebody next to me and next to her, she would never have thought, oh, they must be dating, right. Especially at that young age.
Right.
Yeah. So what about you there, Mr. Bill Ryan? Well,
I not to get us off the topic, and I'll bring us back, but there are a couple things that Amy said, since this podcast is about relationships, I kind of wanted to put a pin in. The comment at 6 months, I think that's an important point, and I totally agree with it. That was my experience too. In fact, I would, in talking to a good buddy of mine back home in Chicago, I would kind of reference that time frame. Not that I would
Wasn't a
focus
threshold.
on that approaching date or whatever, deadline, but that seemed to be apropos for me too. The other thing that I don't know if I want to applaud you both for this, but I am. It strikes me, and I am impressed that both of you exited your marriages as early as you did, and it's it makes an impression on me because I was way the opposite.
Right.
Like I overstayed my welcome. But we don't have to talk about it. We can get back to dating with kids. But I think that I have an admiration, if that's the right word, that you both were strong enough to make that decision and clear-headed enough to see that you needed to make the decision.
Oh, that's interesting. So my father sat me down. I won't use the exact words, but he basically said, if you're not in this forever, and I'm like you, where I get along with my ex-husband. He's great. We've golfed with him. We hang out with him and his girlfriend. I married a great guy. He just wasn't my forever. Mm-hmm. So when my dad sat me down, because I said, we went through the therapy and whatnot, and he said, if you're going to make this decision, you don't go back. Like, you make this decision, you say this to him, there's no wavering here. Once you put it out there that this is the decision you've made, that's it. So be really clear-minded, clear-headed when you move forward with that statement that, that you want a divorce.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that, because he said, if you can't look in the mirror and say to yourself that you've exhausted all measures, you're not ready yet. Mm-hmm. So did you have a sounding board? Like my parents, I'm still extremely close to them, and I still have them. Thank goodness. I'm very fortunate. At that time, who was your sounding board?
I was pretty spiritual back then. In fact, Ryan, who's my ex-husband, he and I used to have, we were in our late 20s, 30s, and he's from Tennessee. So I'm in the Bible Belt, lived in North Carolina, started going to church with him, and we started having Bible study at our house. And one of the couples was actually our minister, one of the ministers at the church we went to. And it was them. Interesting, because I was of the belief, no, I've got to do everything I can. Divorce is not what God wants, and I don't want this. And I did not want to get divorced. Mm-hmm. I adored Ryan. And when I say adore, I loved him, but I really adored him. And I didn't want the divorce. And it was actually them who sat down and said, listen, although I loved my ex-husband, he was not doing things that were kind at the time. Mm-hmm. And they had said to me, this is not what God wants for you. You need to be treated better. And they kind of were the ones that were my sounding board.
Wow.
That and my father-in-law. Ryan's dad, he's passed away since, but he was just a great man. And I remember sitting down with him, and he was such a lovely soul. And I felt like he loved me and was like, you deserve better.
He had your best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
wow, that
was my situation.
You were also in a Bible study at some point, right? Were they oh, there's a little chuckle there, my husband. Were they a sounding board?
No.
Oh.
No.
Menza is a sounding board for you, right?
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
Still is.
Yeah. I won't go down the whole rabbit hole of Bible studies. There's a lot I could say there, but so I won't. We'll leave that for another day.
Yeah, would that?
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I do want to ask you, how old were your kids when you got divorced? Because you were talking about you stayed married for quite a while.
Yeah.
Were your kids adults when you got?
Oh yeah,
all of them.
Yeah,
you have 4.
I have 4 kids.
4 kids. They were all adults.
Young adults.
My oldest was 29.
I was going to say 30.
And youngest was like 22.
Okay.
And you know, you would think it would be easier for your kids that they're older, that they'd kind of get it. The problem in my case was my ex and I were good actors. Like the world was shocked, right? I mean, they thought, well, you guys were the perfect couple. Why are you? In fact, one of my kids, I think, even used those words. And I said, well, you saw what we wanted you to see. You didn't see
behind the scenes.
Yeah, behind the scenes. And the other thing in my situation, which, you know, I have to put out there and kind of cop to is, you know, I knew 21 years before my marriage ended that I should have left. So for 21 years, I wasn't bickering, or I was working, which is kind of funny because, and I often say your greatest strengths are your greatest weaknesses, but I was working on mindset. Like I can overcome, I can, you know, I won't react to things. And so if you were watching me, everything looked fine. Every day I had to work on my mindset. And, you know, so was I successful? Yeah, but was I successful? No. Because, you know, I thought, one of the big takeaways for me is I thought, and I expressed to people, I chose happiness every day. And I truly believe that I did. But only after finally leaving and looking back, I was nothing short of shocked how unhappy I was. And I wouldn't have expressed to I expressed to some people through the years the challenges I had, and a couple buddies, Men's one of them and another, were very aware that I was struggling. But, you know, I'd made the choice to hang in there and try to figure it out. So,
like many people do. I know several people that stayed married because they had kids and it was the wrong reasons.
Well, and, you know, I did, you know, I'm somebody who doesn't take a moment for granted. And, you know, I don't think I'm guaranteed tomorrow. So I try to get the best out of every day. And my kids certainly saw that. And, you know, I was doing things to elevate our experience as a family. You know, we had a lake house, and that was a special place. And not only was it special for my family, but we entertained all the time and, you know, made memories for everybody that visited. So
it's funny. We actually reference the entertaining when we go grocery shopping. He knows what I'm going to say. For, let's say, a group at our house of 6, I say, this is not lake house rules. We don't need the food for, 30, because that's how many people would be at their lake house at a time. So we always joke at that little thing.
When we store our grill in the garage because we have to, HOA rules. Every time I pull that grill out of the garage, I think, how am I cooking with such a small grill? I had 2 extra large grills at the lake house, and I was working them both whenever we were entertaining. But anyway.
but you're cooking for 30 versus the two
Yeah,
of you.
exactly.
I want to point out something. I don't feel it, and I could be wrong. So it's more, I guess it's a question, but it seems like women were really good at, hey, I need to talk. I need to, we go through stuff and we have to process it. Maybe this is just me, but I just feel like, hey, can we chat and we talk? And men, I don't think you guys do that. And I don't think it's innate in you to be vulnerable and to say, I'm unhappy, I'm depressed,
Agreed.
Is that an accurate statement that it's a challenge for men to have those types of relationships? Or
No, I would say as a generalization, absolutely. But I'm wired differently, and you're not a close friend of mine if you can't go deep and be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And
it's always been like that for you, even younger.
Yeah. And vulnerability is, we could have multiple episodes on what vulnerability looks like. I mean, it's different for everybody. There are, I believe, levels of vulnerability. But there were times I would have to tell myself to stop. There are times I felt like I was a load on a couple of my friends because I was, and neither one of them would say, actually three of them would not say, you need to get out. That wasn't advice I was receiving. If any of them said that, they'd be justified in saying it because it'd be like, hey, we got the broken record playing here,
Right.
You either change the record or get out. Mm-hmm. So be interesting to have that conversation with them. But
yeah, it would be interesting to hear their perspective from back then as to if they felt they led you, with their heart or their head. They were just great listeners. Yeah.
And I was, I hope, a great listener for them too when they needed it. But you're right. I mean, it's generally speaking, finding men that are willing to be vulnerable is that would probably be the exception.
Mm-hmm.
My thoughts on men being vulnerable is it starts at home, and it absolutely starts with the mother. That's my feeling. If a mother is engaged in dialogue with her son as a young man, allowing him to be in his feelings and encouraging him to be in his feelings and expressing those feelings, that is huge, because the father isn't going to really do that, in my opinion. So I think it comes from the mother. And I think as women, we owe that to our sons to make them great men. Mm-hmm. That's what I feel. Why? Oh, I keep hitting the table. Why were you chuckling at that?
So much to say. Have you met my mother?
Well, that's generational also.
Yeah.
Look at my mother. She wasn't that far behind in years from your mom.
Well, I think the corollary to because I think it'd be wonderful to grow up with that kind of experience. Mm-hmm. So I flash over my many relationships, particularly in high school. I had some really great relationships. One of my buddies had that kind of mother. The rest of them didn't. Mm. And I think, so my answer would be, and not to at all controvert your position, my answer would be that, because I immediately think of these guys, and I think we were wired differently and we knew what we were lacking. Mm-hmm. And so we filled that lack with our friendships. And how we found each other, I think it was just luck. But
and I think of my brothers. My brothers are great communicators, and I think
but they grew up with
my mom.
Yeah, the mom model that you profess. Yeah,
I mean, not everything, but for sure, I think up until we were probably 18, we didn't really have a voice. Like, oh, do you want to go to dinner? Where do you want to go? Fine. But when it came to big things, we didn't have a voice. As soon as we were like 16, 17, 18, they respected our opinions and they asked those difficult questions and they heard us. They were actually listening at that point. But you're the one with the son. So were you raising Christian at all with that type of permission, if you will, to be vulnerable, to be in his feelings and allow him to, because, raising a little boy is definitely different than raising a little girl. So, and I don't know it,
I would say that's probably a mistake that I made. I actually don't recall, like now I think, gosh, I wish I would have just allowed him. It would be okay if you wanted to cry. Again, I didn't know at that time. My generation growing up, my mom and dad, I mean, they didn't talk. I mean, you didn't talk to your parents. They weren't your friends. You had your friends. You did I never had a relationship with my mom and dad other than parenting. So when you talk about your mom and your brothers, who are probably the same generation, it was not that way in my house. I love my mom. I mean, she's amazing, but we weren't close growing up. I mean, she was my mom. And I parented the way that I was parenting, the way that I knew. So when I had Christian and I was single, he was my life. I loved being a mom. I always wanted to be a mom. But I was strict more so than my friends. And I think he would tell you, like now going back, like I think he would say he respects the fact that he never really saw me drinking, or not that I wasn't doing it. I just didn't do it around him, where everybody else was like, well, let's drink with our kids. I wouldn't do it. And part of that was just my own upbringing. It was funny though, when I was reaching out to my son about this podcast, one of the things he said, and I'm going to butcher this, so it's not a quote, but he said the divorce, what was hard for him with the divorce was because he lived with me most of the time. He has a great relationship with his dad, but it's every other weekend and one day. But his dad, he lived with me. He said, he goes, it's not your fault, but you couldn't teach me how to be a man. There's just nothing you could do. You did the best that you could, but you couldn't teach me the things that I needed to know how to treat women, how to communicate. He even said how to communicate, how to treat women. So it's so funny that you bring this up, because when I asked him about dating when you're a kid, he brought this up. So it was something that was on his mind as a young man at 24. I never got to see what it was like. I never had a male role model in my home knowing how to treat a woman. Right. And so now, he's navigating dating and, how do I do this? And not that it was negative, but he just said that this is something that I never really got to see. But I never, my son and I struggled with him as a teenager. I was trying to control him, and instead of just letting him be. And we have, in my mind, a great relationship now. But when he was 15, 16.
Oh, those years are brutal.
Oh, it was tough. Tough for him.
Imagine
tough for
a teenage
me.
girl.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, not easy.
But I just adore Christian. I think he's just a kind soul. He's a lot like me. I mean, not that I'm a kind soul, but he is just a good, I don't know. He's
you did
such
good,
a good
Mom.
egg.
You
So
should pat yourself on the back. You did good.
Thanks.
Well, I saw you making a note, which we can go to, but I did want to bring up one other thing. Did you want to piggyback off of that?
Oh, go ahead.
So one of the things.
That's why I make notes, so I don't have to remember.
One of the things that I was, when I got into kind of like a more serious relationship at one point, he had 2 kids, 2 girls, and obviously I had Grace, and I said to him, I have no problem if you guide my daughter. You can guide her if she's planning on jumping off the roof into a pool and we're at somebody's house. Please guide her. Don't govern her. That was a big thing for me, only because she had a father, has a father. And same thing, she was with me the majority of her younger years. It was like 70-30. That's before the whole Florida model switched to 50-50. So every other weekend and Wednesdays, which it was religious, she always went. But their relationship wasn't as strong because she wasn't with him as much. So as she got older, it got better. But the disciplinary action, that was a no-no. Like, he knew there was no way that he was going to have any punishments. There wasn't an option. And the same. I wasn't about to like go punish his daughters who were, older than Grace. But it's interesting now because there's times where Grace when she was living with us, he would probably have, bit his lip or tongue, whatever the phrase is, bite your tongue, because he had opinions on maybe how a conversation was going. But when she left, he would tell me, and that was fair. He wanted me to know. He wanted to share those feelings with me, and that was important for me to hear because I wanted to hear his perspective. So did you ever come across that where like you were thinking, okay, this person better not be disciplining my kid?
All the time.
All the time. It's amazing, right?
All the time. It's interesting. And I think it's a male to male thing. I had a big issue with it. And I think that's how you know too, if you're dating somebody who's a good person. If you're a woman and you have male children, and you're dating a man, and I just think that there's this alpha, and there have been some guys that I was like, okay, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, that was actually one of the notes. What happens if you are dating somebody and your child or kids do not like your significant other that you're dating? You can probably talk about that too a little bit. It has happened. But that's a problem.
It's a problem. And that happened to me a couple times. And again, you got to put your kids first.
Yeah.
They're permanent. They're your kids. I think the whole dating, you have to know your child, what their needs are. We all live by our mistake. I mean, we do better when we make mistakes, and, we can be the greatest parents, but it only takes one time to, you bring one bad person around, and,
right.
I don't know, you just have to be, the advice I would give anybody is just be careful, just protect. And, you can never go wrong with waiting 6 months, waiting until, figure out who this person is. And, then because you could get somebody around your children and then.
Yeah, and it's a nightmare.
I see you looking at me. So.
Well, I don't know if you wanted to, you were
I
writing stuff down.
I don't know Christian, and I wish I did. And I give him credit for saying what he said to you.
Yeah, me too.
What I would say to Christian is, I suspect, because I know you pretty well, that he received things from you that in his future, he's going to be very appreciative of that. I think single mothers, that's a tough job, and so single mothers raising boys or sons and single mothers raising daughters, that, it's a different dynamic. And, he made the comment about, I didn't have a role model to see how to treat women. And I would say I didn't either. You know, I don't know. For me, it was at a very young age, I was like trying to figure things out. And I was intentional about not raising my kids the way that I was raised. And so I would do the opposite sometimes, and that's not always good. But, you know, I don't know where, certainly in probably middle school and high school, it is, and we've already said it, it's a difficult time for kids. And I do think, you know, you can have these pivotal moments that might define the trajectory of the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And if you get those wrong, mm-hmm. that can really screw up your future. I don't get the feeling that Christian's that kid. Mm-mm. He might fumble around a little bit right now. You know, it's interesting. Here I'm 64, and
you are.
I am. I wasn't going to tell anybody, but now you know. But I remember when I was, you know, call it high school. Like 64 is really old, right? Yeah. But it's not. And you know, we talked last episode about how old you were when you made a decision to get married, and I was 24 for a day. I was way too young. Of course, I didn't think I was way too young. So Christian's 24.
He's 24.
Could you imagine him married?
No.
And so
I know. I think that all the time.
My point is, when he expresses this potential lack, mm-hmm. you know, lack of training or whatever, he's just 24.
I know.
He's got the best years ahead, and he can make choices today about the kind of man he wants to be. You know, when I was growing up, I was forced to play football, and I hated getting hit. I loved the sport, and I still love the sport today. I still play it. But when I was a kid, I just didn't like getting hit. And we I don't know how old I was when I started playing football, but I remember having a conversation with my dad forcing me to stay in football. So my freshman year of high school, I played. And then basically I just quit, and I got in a big argument with him. And that was his basis. It's going to teach you how to be a man. Well,
that's comical.
Yeah. But, you know, in fairness to my dad, I have to say, I mean, he lost his dad at 6, so he didn't really have any kind of role model. His mom was working, so, you know, he had to fend for himself. But, you know, I think the quote, teaching me how to be a man, is way overrated.
Yeah.
And, you know, just be a good human. Don't worry about being a good man. Be a good human.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that he has you still.
Yeah.
So if anything, that conversation would have prompted me to say, let's do it. Let me be here for you now as a young adult. You know, is he in a serious relationship? Before he gets into a serious relationship, you know, talk to me now. Yeah. You know, it doesn't have to be the birds and the bees stuff, obviously, but I think it's important for him to know that he can lean on you now.
Yeah, no, that's true. I don't think it was this big revelation of, you know, I really lacked this and poor me. It wasn't, it was just like, yeah, you know, when you and dad got divorced, I just didn't have that male role model and things like that. So I think, one of the things, you know, that I said was, you know, we didn't have podcasts and, you know, all these things. Like you talked about Jay Shetty. I mean, I listened to Jay Shetty. I listened to Matthew Hussey. I listened to Lewis Howes. Like all of these people, the things that I've learned as an adult because of what this technology now. I'm not a huge reader. I just don't have time. But when I'm in the car, I love to listen to this stuff. I love personal growth. And I think information has never been more readily accessible.
Agreed.
And how to navigate relationships or anything in life, really, it's easy. If you have a thirst for knowledge and wanting to grow, it's never been an easier time.
For sure.
Never. So that was kind of my thing was, listen, if you don't know how to do something, YouTube it. I never had that. We had to go to the library.
Look it up in the card
Look
catalog.
it up in where's the
card catalog?
Encyclopedia Britannica.
Librarian Lucy.
It's just crazy the amount of information that we have that we can do stuff and learn and grow and,
And I think for Bill and I, early on when we started dating, he acknowledged that, my, communication skill set was different from what he's dated prior, or very different, whatever. And I appreciated that he acknowledged that. Mm-hmm. And I think we just bounced off of each other because he enjoyed those deep conversations, right?
Yeah. It was, it was happening before we were dating.
Yeah.
I think of that first dinner we had at Culinary, and I was like, wow, this, I want to sit down with her some more. We got a lot to talk about. It was very obvious to me that you were the unicorn, to use an appropriate label.
I might have said this last time we were here. Both of you have high emotional intelligence, and that's what draws me to the two of you. And that's your gift.
Oh, thank you.
We're both friends with a lot of women, but I do think your perspective, it comes from emotional intelligence, in my opinion. And I love my lady friends, but
she's totally hitting on me and I like it.
Yeah. You like it a lot.
Okay. We have to go to the cards.
Let's do it.
These are new cards.
Wait, do we get through all the notes on the,
pretty much
on the small Post-it note?
So last time I held this up, you didn't even get to see it because the camera, I was really bad at doing my camera. I always have notes and I love Pictionary, the game. So, I always bring my big paper. Yeah. We covered everything. I try to keep us on
I'm just checking.
We got Alex here doing this, right? No, just kidding. Okay, so these are different from close, closer, closest. Mm-hmm. This is, interestingly enough, about our history, our origins, our family. So feel free to take one. They're in no order.
You pick first, Amy. Guess go first, then you go, honey.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
What did you daydream about when you were growing up? What did I daydream about when I was growing up?
I wanted to be a teacher.
And pick an age, right?
Yeah.
And do you daydream now?
No.
Oh.
No, you got to have a daydream.
I don't think I daydream now.
What did
we just make things happen. I don't dream about them.
Well, I actually had a moment. I was probably shortly after the separation when I realized, I'm like, wow, I don't have a daydream. I always had daydreams, or dreams at least, about who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I remember realizing I didn't. I was like, oh, gotta fix that.
My daydream was teaching. I always wanted to be a teacher.
I don't remember. I generally don't remember what I daydreamed about when I was younger. I had a great
Did you fake play?
Yeah, I had my girlfriend, like when I was a little girl, we would always play with dolls and it was always, getting married, the mom and the dad and stuff like that, having kids. It's funny, I wanted to be married and have a family. That so corny.
No.
But I did,
No,
and
not.
I really just, I don't know.
Mine was being Melissa Gilbert from Little House on the Prairie.
Great show. I love that show.
I love that show. He was an incredible
Let
dad.
me ask you both this. Here's, because I can take you both back to a similar point in time. May not have been the same exact time frame, but you're both newly divorced, raising a child. If you sat in quiet and you had a thought about, maybe in the context of what's going on that you didn't like, but you had a thought about, here's where I want to go. What would that thought be? Or what would that thought have been?
Well, at that time, I was making incredible money, and I was just so driven with my career, and I was just getting promoted after promoted and doing really well. So that's where my focus was. Aside from the weekends, because thank goodness I didn't work weekends or holidays. That's kind of where my head was.
Did you have goals?
Well, yeah, it was to basically be the executive vice president of where I worked.
So I would submit that those were your daydreams.
Okay, so I never looked at it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Amy?
Newly divorced.
Yeah.
Honestly,
In the context of, I've got to
Refocus.
refocus, set a new path.
I think I knew at that time I really needed to focus on me and loving me and understanding, like, okay, where am I at now? What happened? How did I get here? How do I make, again, I kind of goes back to me saying I always want to learn, and I'm constantly my brother said to me one time, he goes, I've never met anybody so focused on growth like you. Like, I'm always sending, you got to listen to this, or, and that's, I think, how I was. It's always wanting to be better.
You yearn.
Yes. Yeah. I want to grow. I want to be better. I will take responsibility for things like, I shouldn't have done that. I'm so sorry. And then I'll think about it. Okay, well, why did I do that? Mm-hmm. Like, what made me do that? Was that a trauma in my past? Why did I do, I've always been like that.
We love her.
I've always been like that. So.
We love you for
Wayne
it.
Dyer taught me that you can't have an emotion without a preceding thought. So if you have an emotion and maybe it surprises you or scares you, go find out what that thought was.
Mm-hmm. And for me as a young adult, or maybe even after the divorce, if I didn't like the results of something, I was very aware, don't do that again. Mm-hmm. So I was paying attention to the results more so than the action. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, for some reason that stuck with me. Do you want to read your card, dear?
Sure. What were the jobs/skills of our ancestors? Which ancestors? My ancestors?
Like your grandparents. What was their career?
Let's see. My matriarchal grandfather was a farmer. Mm-hmm. Actually, he and my grandmother, that was a shared job skill. My grandmother on my dad's side, because she lost her husband, was a legal secretary. She worked for a long time, large part of her life, and she lived to 94. She and I were really close. My parents, mm-hmm. That's my parents. My dad was a builder, entrepreneur. My mom was very involved in everything that my dad was creating when they were young. She was an interior designer. So,
okay. Do you want to chime in on that card, or move on to the next?
Go to the next one.
Yeah,
okay.
There's nothing deep about that card.
Okay. What is one interesting fact that surprised you about their lives? Meaning grandparents, probably, not parents. Interesting fact that surprised you. So my grandfather was an incredible tailor, and my grandmother was always impeccably dressed because he would make her clothes. I don't know if that surprised me though, because I knew all this. I don't know. This one's interesting too. You're right.
I have a good story. My mom's mom, my grandmother on my mom's side, I think she was born in 1905. She had the oldest of 5 kids. My great grandfather, her dad, they lived in the country in Ohio, and he was a state representative of Ohio. But my grandmother knew she wanted to go to college before women were allowed to do this, right? In order for her to go to college, she had to go to an accredited high school. So she left home at the age of 14. She put an ad in the paper, asked to be a nanny as long as she could room and board, stay at their place. She would nanny for free. She just wanted to make sure she could go to school.
Wow.
And then when she got to college, she went a year, then she would work a year, and then her brother would go a year, and they would pass back and forth the money so that both of them could go to school. So, they go to school for a year, work a year, and then they supported each other financially, so both of them could go to college.
That's awesome.
Crazy story. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids today don't suffer, educationally speaking, right, with what, generations back had to do to go to school. Yeah. It was a privilege to be educated. Yeah. Right. They don't understand that word at all.
Privilege.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, Amy, thank you so much for being our guest. We love having you. We might have to bring her back again another time. We could just keep talking and talking for hours. We just thoroughly enjoy your company.
Well, I enjoy yours. I'm so grateful that you even asked me, and I love it. And I love doing research. So
yeah. Well, until next time, our audience, we appreciate you listening. And
you are.
I'm the unicorn.
I'm the frog.
We'll see you next time.